Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lecture series called The Early Signs of Human Behavior, Prehistoric Culture of Early Humans. This lecture is a follow-up to how do we measure and quantify time in prehistory, and moreover, how do we track the changes that are occurring. This lecture is going to go over how we recognize the early signs of human behavior. Moreover, what does the material record say about that behavior and the evolution of human adaptability? I'm going to be explaining these principles from the perspective of processual archaeology, as in how does culture reflect adaptations to the environment, and a post-processual question. How does this material culture demonstrate early signs of culture norms, values, and shared identity? Okay, so let us begin. So first things first, here we go. We got to understand where we're at in time. Where are we at in time? Okay? That we are, in terms of Earth's geological time, we're at the tail end of the Pliocene, going into the Ice Age of the Pleistocene. All right? And we're going to talk about the early ancestors of humans that display and demonstrate early human behavior in the last 2 million years or so. Okay, so to be precise, prehistoric or Paleolithic culture really doesn't get its start until we see the evolution of the genus Homo. Okay, it is not until the various species of our family, that is the genus Homo, develop where we start seeing human-like behavior. And when we say human-like behavior, we're talking about, one, material culture that demonstrates problem-solving skills. All right. 2, material culture that demonstrates a shared cultural tradition, as in this thing is repeated over and over. 3, and more importantly, this material culture demonstrates unique circumstances in the environment that show the adaptive function of culture and the norms of culture. So case in point, in order to understand when all of this happened, you got to understand a little bit of primate evolution, just a little bit, in that primates in and of themselves, which we have this ability to problem solve, to see patterns and to adapt in kind. Primates are one of the smartest group of mammals on Earth. But human-like behavior took a long time to evolve, as in the right environmental conditions had to be there to turn on and off certain genes to get our brains to develop, and those genes had to be positively selected from the environmental circumstances in which they derive. So as we go down the layers of time, 55 million years ago, 34 million years ago, 23 million years ago, to the first bipeds, which we show up in this time, the Paleocene, right there. That's our family, the hominids. We are bipedal apes. Prehistory, in regards to us, we really don't get our start off until about 1.8 million years ago, when we start seeing habitual human behavior in the archaeological record. So it took quite a long time, just, good Lord, almost 60 million years for this behavior to show up. All right, and this is important for archaeologists, even paleoanthropologists, is to understand where in the archaeological record and the fossil record do we see human behavior begin to stand out, or when do we start seeing the cultural trends of humans. And we use the following principle to make a clear distinction between human cultural adaptations and other members in the primate family. All right, because this is where we're at. The Paleolithic period. The Paleolithic period covers about a million and a half years. It's the development of the genus Homo and the development of, the cultural adaptations of tool culture and various other cultural trends that would follow us into the present day. And it marks the transition of the adaptive radiation of the genus Homo and the extinction of other previous hominid groups such as the Australopithecines. In addition, this prehistoric cultural trend occurs. It's called biocultural evolution. That we've noticed from the fossil record that every major cultural adaptation in terms of tool culture is associated with a major cognitive change. And when we say cognitive change, we're going off the skeletal structure of these bipeds. It's not until we get to Homo habilis where we start seeing a brain size that is similar to that of modern humans. Well, I'm saying modern, closer to the range of modern humans. And what larger brain size means is better spatial awareness, better pattern recognition, and more but better problem solving skills. Doesn't denote that someone's smarter. We just that the more hardware you have in terms of brain, the more neural synapses you have, and the more hemispheres can communicate with each other so you can see the nuances of nature around you. So we realize that every member of the genus Homo at this stage demonstrates some form of biocultural evolution, a physiological adaptation that facilitates a cultural adaptation, and that cultural adaptation that facilitates a biological adaptation. They kind of go in tandem together. And here's why. This is where we understand the cause of prehistory. What is it? Excuse me. Not the cause of prehistory, but the changing environment that would select for the behavior of early prehistoric humans, like creatures like Homo habilis and erectus. Interglacial periods. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. It'll be glacial activity that will influence a lot of the cultural behaviors of Paleolithic behavior as well as Neolithic behavior. Okay, that it is climate change on an epic scale that has altered the human cultural adaptation for the past 12,000 years. All right, we call that the Holocene. We'll get into that later on, but we notice that it is these glacial activities, glacial movement, that has changed the ecology of Africa that would shape prehistoric behavior a million years ago. And here's why. The material culture of early human groups is found in East Africa, okay? But we realize that material culture reflects the environmental conditions of glacial periods. So, when Homo habilis and Homo erectus were developing their cognitive abilities, they were adapting to what we would call a glacial period, as in the glaciers in northern latitudes were growing and expanding, and it was drying out the environment in which Homo habilis and erectus occupied. And their material culture, their problem-solving skills, had to adapt to this particular environment. All right? Because here's the deal. Glacial activity affects climate and local weather patterns. Right? And let's make the distinction between the two. Weather is the immediate, what you will call, system of a given geographic zone. So everything from dew point precipitation, wind at a particular spot. Climate is the global system, the system of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation in the water cycles around the world. That's the distinction between the two. And from what we understand is that this Scandinavian glacier in the northern latitudes altered rapidly the local microclimates in East Africa, and it changed the whole cultural trajectory of our early human ancestors. Case in point, we're going to be talking about the yellow and the green today. What does the material culture of Homo habilis suggest about what it means to be human? And what does the material culture of Homo erectus mean in terms of being human? And what are the cultural trends that would define the late genus Homo in blue moving forward? It gets awesome. So first things first. Homo habilis was one of the first members of the genus Homo to have what we call a habitual tool culture. All right, a habitual tool culture, as in they were utilizing a foreign object, a tool, to overcome a physiological handicap. Okay, that in and of itself is a great cultural adaptation. That what this means is this: that to have a tool means you need to be physiologically self-aware. That means you have to be aware that your anatomy, your immediate anatomy, has certain limitations. Okay, and how is this possible? Well, we realized by observing the fossils of early hominids that the development of a larger brain size of 752 cubic centimeters to 612 allowed for greater cognitive awareness. All right. And if you take physical anthropology, there's more details on brain size and environment later on. But from an archaeological point of view, we realize from looking at the fossil remains of this hominin that we see the early signs of human behavior begin, as in habitual, consistent tool use. Now, we got to understand that Homo habilis illustrates what we call the variables of processual theory. Homo habilis, we don't have enough evidence to denote its cultural adaptations in terms of symbols, language, or communication. This is us in our raw form, for lack of a better words. But we do have good archaeological evidence to interpret the material culture of Homo habilis from a processual standpoint. Homo habilis' tool culture, the Oldowan tool industry, is directly associated with the cultural adaptation of scavenging. And let's put this in perspective. You're in the middle of a glacial period in northern latitudes. Africa is drying out because as ice expands, it slows down the rate of evaporation and condensation around the world, creating deserts and grassland. Homo habilis is a small hominid. He's about 5'5", no disrespect to anybody out there. And he can't really run down and hunt its food. So it has to take advantage of the leftovers of large predatory cats in the area. This is why if you look at their hand axes, the profile, the shape of it, it does not indicate hunting, but it indicates scavenging. So Homo habilis was a scavenger. And the reason why this matters in terms of prehistory is because, like human groups, we're going to take advantage of a natural resource. And the best resource they had available was, the leftovers of predatory cats. And what their material culture shows us is they're adapting to their physiological environment. Their material culture is exclusively associated with scavenging, because you couldn't kill something with this unless you got up on it. So, from what we can tell, Homo habilis discovered a wonderful tool to solve the problem of acquiring food. Now, secondly, this does demonstrate planning and coordination and self-awareness. Rocks don't break like this. If you look at the profile of these rocks, you'll notice that these stones are hit in precise manners. So this is the first time where we see habitual flint knapping or making of stone tools develop in human history. Flint knapping, all for the next 1.5 million years, would be the dominant form in which human groups would develop and make tools all around the world that started right here in Africa. So this is the first sign of a prehistoric cultural trend of stone tool making. All right. So from the Neolithic, even all the way up until the time we had metal, cultures around the world have been still using tools. Now, this is what I backpedaled from is this. We know that possibly other hominids may have made stone tools or maybe use other tools. But before we understand is this. Tools in and of themselves, tool use is a primate thing, particularly an ape thing, and we're apes. But human behavior or prehistoric cultural behavior that is associated with humans, our tool technology is way more refined, way more robust, and way more diverse than any other group of organisms that came before us. And here's why. This requires extraordinary mental capacity. All right, extraordinary, because it requires hand-eye coordination. It requires an understanding of leverage and, more importantly, an understanding of how to apply pressure. What this shows us is that Homo habilis, like humans of later times, would have the ability to plan ahead, see a problem, and adjust accordingly. Even though he's just scavenging, but he's showing the early signs of what we would call Paleolithic stone tool culture. This is the very first stone tool culture in human history. So let me explain what a stone tool culture is. A stone tool culture is a tool technology or a methodology of creating tools that is habitually repeated and passed on. As I repeat, a technology that is in the manufacturing of stone tools that is repeated and passed on. Homo habilis had a run of about 1.5 million years, and everywhere we find Homo habilis, we find these tools, which lets us know that, hey, Homo habilis had a culture, had a means of transferring information from one group to the next, and this particular tool functioned because it solved the problem of overcoming the handicap of nails in order to acquire food. So this is an excellent illustration of the earliest signs of prehistoric human behavior. All right. Oh, and we can also tell what hands they used. Now, let's go to my next favorite, Homo erectus. Homo erectus demonstrates a new morphology in human development. All right, this is the first time in the archaeological record where we see human-like body size. Homo habilis, he was small, like 5 feet, 5'4", but Homo erectus in Africa would be as tall as 6'1". This is the first time we see anatomically modern like humans. I'm gonna say not anatomically modern, but the skeletal structure from the neck down is similar to that of modern humans. All right, and this matters because Homo erectus is gonna start doing cultural adaptations that would define other human groups in the foreseeable future. This is why we really kind of drill down on this particular hominid. All right, first things first. Out of all of the hominins that have come before, Homo erectus has the brain size that is closest to that of modern humans. Homo erectus had a brain size range from 700 cubic centimeters to 1250. This matters because the average human brain is 1250 to 1375. So what this tells us is that based off cranial morphology alone, Homo erectus may have been thinking and behaving similar to that of modern humans. Not as fancy as we are, because certain parts of their brain did not develop as well as ours did, but we can see that they have similar problem solving skills and future planning that similar to that of modern humans. And here's why. This is the skeletal overview. Once we get past Homo habilis, brain size takes off. We realize that in order to understand prehistoric cultures that before Homo sapien, you got to understand the significance of brain size, which I've mentioned, but I'm going to clarify further. Larger brain size, from the perspective of biocultural evolution, works like this. The environment is changing so rapidly because of various glacial events that it's positively selecting larger brains. All right, that's one. Two, larger brains may not denote intelligence, but they do denote greater ability and problem-solving skills. And I'm careful when I use intelligence because it depends on how you measure it. All right. Three, a brain will evolve and change in response to environmental pressure because the brain is the main regulatory organ in a human body. Okay, it's responsible for keeping the body in homeostasis. So the larger the brain means the greater environmental demands on the body to maintain homeostasis. And lastly, larger brain size means greater communication between the hemispheres of the brain, greater neurological synapses, and that kind of communication facilitates abstract thought, problem-solving skills, and greater spatial awareness. All of the things that Homo erectus had that would usher in a new cultural adaptation in which humans would utilize all the way up into agriculture. Okay, I talked about cranial shape. And here's why. Homo erectus was a migratory species, just like humans. All the way up until humans were migratory all the way up until about 12,000 years ago and beyond. And here's why. Homo erectus, or Homo ergaster is just the Homo erectus of Africa, did all develop the cultural adaptations we would take full advantage of. So first example, this was the first human-like ancestor to have full control and use of fire. All right, full control and use of fire, and that is crazy. And here's why. We take fire for granted. We don't appreciate fire, and more importantly, we consider it just, part of being human. But we may have inherited the cultural adaptation of fire control from our fossil ancestors, Homo erectus, in which we evolved from in Africa. So the use of fire, the discovery of fire control may have been transferred along all the way up until humans evolved in Africa. That's one. Two, the physiological anatomy of a long body frame of being 6 feet and tall passed on to early humans because the early humans of our species were of African ancestry and we had a longer frame. And that a longer frame was not only a means of maintaining homeostasis, but also facilitated a cultural adaptation of long distance running and essentially the ability to go to migrate and go from one niche to the next. So Homo erectus was one of the first members of our evolutionary family to have the ability to migrate like we can, like modern humans can, and also have the ability to control fire. This is very important from two perspectives. The processual side of things. The migratory behavior had to be utilized because the environment of East Africa was very turbulent and you could not stay in one spot too long. That large brain size allowed them to recognize the patterns in nature so they can move from one niche to the next to facilitate survival. All right. Third, fire was essential. We are naked here. Okay. It can get very cold in Africa at night. Use of fire not only helps with maintaining homeostasis, but also keeps away unwarranted predators. All of those skills we would inherit and later take full advantage of as we migrated and populated the known world. But all of those cultural trends started with Homo erectus. And this is how we know archaeologically. All right. We find Homo erectus fossils all over the old world. All over the old world. Right? This is how we know they left Africa. We find fossils in Zucodan Cave, Atapuerca, going as far back as 1.6 in Dmanisi Cave, and Atapuerca 600,000 years, and Zucodan Cave 700,000 years. So we know that Homo erectus was a transnital migratory species, similar to that of humans later on. All right, these are all the archaeological sites associated with Homo erectus. And what this tells us is the following. Homo erectus didn't spend a long time in Africa. When he showed up in the fossil record 1.8 million years ago, he was already in the country of Georgia in Dmanisi Caves by 1.6. So 200,000 years, he was already in a different region of the world. Now, why does this matter? Because here's the deal. Short of the agricultural revolution that is the Neolithic, Paleolithic cultures, even of humans, was migratory transnital adaptations for almost 150,000 years. And this is the first time within the archaeological record where we see the prehistoric cultural adaptation of seasonal migration, use of temporary camps, and more importantly, the development of regional stone tool cultures. Because mind you, there's no nation states here. Every group of humans, even Homo erectus, had their own little flair on how they would use their material culture. However, Homo erectus made the same tool over and over and over again, regardless of group. And here's why. Well, I talked about this. Skip over that. Sorry about that. Let me go back. Pause for a moment. I lost my train of... Here we go. I found my notes. I'm sorry. So, we're talking about the stone tool culture of Homo erectus. Now, Homo erectus already established the cultural trends of migration, controlling fire, and going into different parts of the world. And what we've noticed from the archaeological record, everywhere we find the material culture of Homo erectus, the same tool is there. Now, let me explain something to you. It's not that Homo erectus is not intelligent, is that if a simple fact that they developed a tool style that is effective in solving a problem. And in the words of my daddy, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, the Acheulean tools industry, it's been proven to be effective everywhere Homo erectus has gone. So therefore, this is how we explain why that tool culture has remained relatively unchanged for almost 1 million years. That the Acheulean hand axe is an improvement upon the Oldowan tool industry that they inherited from Homo habilis. Okay? But here's the thing. We know of this. Homo erectus was definitely a hunter. Definitely a hunter. And here's why. Based off their physiological morphology, the animal bones found in various caves associated with them, Homo erectus was using its physical adaptation to run and chase its prey down. But they did not have spear technology from what we can tell. But they did have this stabbing-like hand axe dagger, which was found all over the archaeological world where Homo erectus is associated with. and it looks like this. This is a bifacial cutting tool. All right, it fits firmly in the palm of your hand. And from what we understand is that this particular hand axe, this particular tool in and of itself, allows for thrusting, stabbing, and slicing. But based off the animal remains found in Zucatán Cave, Atapuerca, it is clear that Homo erectus was hunting small game animals, all right, like deer or fawns, and he would use their ability to run long distance to chase a prey down, follow the tracks, and dispatch an animal once it got up on it. Now, these are all cultural adaptations that are associated with material culture. Animal remains in caves, the shape of the hand axe, the physiological shape of Homo erectus skeleton. All of these material culture denotes unique cultural adaptations of Homo erectus. So, what does this all mean? Homo erectus is demonstrating to us, for the first time in the fossil record, the closest examples of complex human behavior similar to modern Homo sapien. Very similar. It's almost breathtakingly so. Okay? And to have a stone tool culture be distributed all over the old world for the most part and remain unchanged for almost 1 million years denotes that they were encountering similar problems all over the world when they were migrating. This tool proved to be effective in all of those scenarios. And 3, they were able to teach and reinforce this cultural behavior in various Homo erecti groups all throughout the old world. All right. So this is just the first installment. So what we see from Homo habilis to Homo erectus is the following. 1, the cultural traditions of stone tool technology being reinforced. This is the first time we see it in the prehistoric record. 2, the development of migratory behavior with Homo erectus. All right. The use of environmental resources via scavenging with Homo habilis. There are still scavenging groups around. We still do them. They call them hunters and gatherers. All right. 3rd, the cultural tradition of seasonal migration and cultural reinforcement of a stone tool culture. All right. They're giving us all the ingredients that would define the next 600,000 years of human cultural evolution and the other prehistoric hominins and prehistoric cultures I'm going to describe to you, from Neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, would change the cultural tone that would make them more similar to humans. And here's why. As the Pleistocene marches on, environmental turbulence forces erectus to go extinct in certain parts of the world and causes the evolution of other species, particularly heidelbergensis and Neanderthal. But the evolution of those species not only triggered physiological changes, but ushered in major cultural changes that would define the human species. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the cultural adaptations of Homo sapiens in the middle part of the Pleistocene and the late Pleistocene, and the fossil ancestors that would define the cultural trends of the late genus Homo. All right. So when you do your reading, understand that by looking at Homo erectus and Homo habilis and the hominids that came before us, you're seeing the genesis of the prehistoric cultural adaptations of hunting and gathering that would define human beings all the way up to the discovery of agriculture. All right. So I will see you all soon, and stand by. This is going to be a fun one. I'm going to talk about how Neanderthal is kind of better at us, better at killing things than we are, and what does that mean for humans. See ya.